Hello everyone. In today's session, we will be creating a SysOperation process. And SysOperation process actually replaces the batch process, run-based batch framework, and it is much optimized than run-based batch process. And there are so many features and optimizations which have been done in SysOperation process. It can be run as synchronous and as well as asynchronous. And by meaning of synchronous and asynchronous is like asynchronous can be scheduled as a batch process and can run on its scheduled time, can be set as a recurring process, and synchronous means interactive, and at the same time when you execute the process it will be run, so you need to wait until it is finished. So this is the main difference. So basically, we'll be starting the SysOperation framework for our example, which we are basically developing a resort management system. And in SysOperation framework, basically we need three classes. One is a controller class, and that basically controls the user interface and also instantiate the processing class. There is one data contract class. Data contract class normally, as you must have seen also in SSRS example, it is used for parameters and also to some validations for those parameters, and automatically it will build up the fields shown to the user. And there is a third class which will be used for processing, that is the actual processing class, which will be basically instantiated in controller. So there will be three elements: controller, data contract, and processing. So we need to just start with our resort management system. So we'll directly start with our data contract class in this case. And let me open our classes folder. And in this pkr_resort, and this is the prefix which we are using. So we will be creating a contract class here. So just right click over it and add and go to the new class item, and we need to give it a name in the same pattern like pkr resort, and here we need to change the resort group basically. So we will be using resort group change contract. So resort basically is our prefix for all the objects which we are creating, and then we need to change our resort group once it is assigned to a resort. And change means we need to change the group, and the contract is for the class type. So we will just add it. So the class has been added, and we now need to put a data contract decorator so that this class represents our contract class, and then we need to also extend the class with SysOperation data contract base class, and also we need to use implements SysOperation validatable. So now to start with, we need to just declare two variables. One will be resort ID and the other one resort group ID. So let me check the EDTs. So these are two variables we need to declare here. pkr resort ID, and it will be resort ID variable, and then pkr resort group ID, and this will be resort group ID variable. So these variables will be used in our contract class. Then what we need to do is basically implement data member methods. So just to start with the decorator, data member, and public, and the return type here will be pkr resort id, and resort id will be the name of method, the param method, or simply a method. We can put it as a param method, resort id, and then the same edt as its parameter. So we'll put it here, and then underscore for the parameter name. Okay, it will be assigned return resort id. So the parameter passed will be assigned to the variable, and it will be returned. And also we need to make it optional by assigning the existing value. So that will be resort id. Once you assign in the parameter, so that will make the parameter optional in case once we are not passing a value, rather we are returning a value. So that will be the case here. And similarly, I will just copy paste this method at the bottom to create another method for group. So here we'll put the edt, and we'll just rename it resort group id. Here also resort group id and resort group id. Just replace so this is our second method which is now implemented. And then we need to also implement a validate method. So you can just right click over here and go to the override. So it is not available in override, just implement it. So public boolean validate. Okay, now we need to put an if condition that if resort id is blank, then we need to return a check failed with a message that resort id must be specified. This will be the method, and we'll this will be the text, and we'll just need to create a label for this. So that will be done in last. And then the second will be, okay, if resort id is filled, then we need to also check whether it exists or does not exist. So I'll put one else if, and that will basically check from the table. The table name, we need to just check what was the table name. That is resort table. So in the resort table, just we need to make sure that our exist method already exists. So we just need to check using this method whether that resort already exists or not. So we will use the static method of exist, and then we'll need to pass the resort id. Okay, and so if it does not exist, so we need to put a not condition, not operator, that is this one. And once we have implemented this not operator, then we need to just pass a return check failed, and here we need to Here we need to just pass the resort ID. And we need to put it resort number. This one does not exist. Okay, so once it is done, then we need to also check our resort group, and that need to be also checked whether resort group is a blank value. So then we need to fail our validation. Resort group ID must be specified, and then also one else if for our resort group does not exist. In the same manner as we have checked the resort ID, okay, so we'll just put this one. Does not exist, and resort group ID. In the table name here, it will be resort group, and we need to just check, yeah, there is already an existing method to check the past resort group ID whether it exists or not. Just keep saving your changes, and if okay, so there is some problem here. I think the brackets, let me check. Okay, so once, okay, still there is a problem. Not all path returns a value invalidate. We need to return here true. If there is no failure, so definitely a true value will be passed. So in this way, validate method has been implemented, and we just need to create the labels for these texts or labels. So we will just open our label file here. So we'll just need to create the labels here, and just close this one. Also close this. Resort ID must be specified. The next one should be resort number does not exist. Resort does not exist. Then it should be resort group ID must be specified. You can input just short text, abbreviated text, that is also okay. But need to be just represent what actually the label means. Resort group ID group does not exist. Just save this file, Okay, now just copy, must be specified, and I will paste it here. Similarly, does not exist, will go here, and then the next one. So the contract class is done now. We have implemented validation for two fields, whether they exist or not, and for their making it mandatory so that the value is input. So both fields are required and must exist in order to change them. So this is how we have implemented our contract. And next we will go ahead and implement the controller class. And before controller, we'll just actually implement the process class here. So for the process class, we'll just create a new class, add and give it a name like pkr underscore resort, and the name should be like resort group change. So this will actually perform the function or the procedure to change the resort group. We need to just declare the two variables which we have also declared in our contract class. So I will just copy paste in order to save our time. These two variables are now declared here, and now we need to also implement an initialize method, so that whenever contract is passed, so the param method should be defaulted to our variables in this main class. So we need to implement this as a protected. Protected means only the same class or its child can use this method, and void means no return variable. Actually, this will only perform the procedure init from contract, and the contract name will be pkr resort group change contract, and then underscore and contract. Here we will implement resort id underscore contract resort id. It should be param resort id. Okay, so this will be assigned, and then resort group id will be assigned param resort group id. Okay, next we need to update the resort group. So we need to just use our table, resort table, and there we need to just declare it and also populate the buffer. Resort table find method should be passed with the resort id value, which must already been initialized, and we need to also update this. So we need to pass a true value for the second parameter, which is for update, in order to update the record. So once this is the record is populated in the table buffer, that will be available for update as well. So once it is done, we need to check whether an method has returned a record. So we need to check whether the resort table rec ID must not be 0. So it means a record has been passed, because rec ID is a big integer or integer 64 type. So now once it is populated, we need to just use resort table resort group ID field with the resort group ID variable, and then we need to also update the table buffer. Pass the update, call the update method in order to update the assigned value as well. So also we need to, so for future requirements, we can also implement a validate method here. Contract already had a validate method, but for future requirement, the main business process class should also have this method. So then we need to use a run method, and in the run method we need to again use the same contract here. Okay, so the same contract is passed as a parameter, and then we need to check whether the contract validate has passed or not passed. So that must be true. If it is not passed, so it should return at this stage, and return should not have any variable, because the void type is already mentioned, means nothing as a variable should be returned. So next statement, we will initialize the contract which has been passed to our init from contract method, and that is already implemented here. So this method will receive the contract class and will populate the variable. Okay, once it is done, then we need to also check the validate method of this class for future validations. Otherwise, the validate, if it is not passing a true value, so that will return also. Means in case this is the validate will pass a false, that in case of check failed, which is not now in it is the case only true. So true will make false, and it will not enter the this chunk, this block. Then what we need to do is TTS begin and TTS commit. Whenever you are deleting or updating a record, it should be enclosed within a transaction. So transaction means if there is some problem, so everything will be rolled back. So we need to just now call our update resort group method, and that's it. So this is how we have implemented our business process class. Just one best practice tip is only you use camel case when you are naming your method. So I have mistakenly used it as initial capital, but it should be initial small, and then each word should have its first letter as a capital. In this also the run should be smaller. Okay, so this is a new thing for whoever is coming from .NET or any other platform. So So it is mentioning the contract. So the problem is here we have not put the brackets. Okay, so we need to just refactor is indentation. This bracket will go off. Okay, now it's done. So the business process class is finalized, and then one more class that is needed is controller class. We need to add this controller and put a name like PKR resort, and this should be resort group change controller. Okay, and so then we need to also extend this class with our SysOperation service controller, and this need to be done here, and we need to also implement one main method here that will be the entry point public static void main args object and then underscore args. Okay, so public is an access modifier, means the method can be called from any other class, and static means this method is static, means without any instantiation of the class this method can be called. Void means there is no return type of this method, and main is basically the method name or entry point. Args is a class using which we can pass the parameters, and this is the instance name of the class. So now we need to just declare the controller here. This is the class name because this method has a scope outside of this class or static method. That's why we need to declare the class or class instance to make use of this class instance. And also we need to initialize the controller. You can do at the same line level as well. Okay, so this should be new, and again the class name automatically is filled, and then we need to also use a class name here. Class name will basically contains our business process class, so we need to return the class name. So class name is returned by a method called class str. Once we pass a class name to it, so it will return as a string. So this will be our resort group change class. In order to make it more clear, I will move it to new line. Okay, so the class name will be returned. The second parameter will be the method name which need to be called or executed. So in this case, that also need to be method str because that will return the method name. So it has two parameters. So one parameter is class name itself, and then second parameter is the method name. So that is run method. So it will return a method string, and then how it need to be run basically. So that need to be passed in the constructor. That will be SysOperation execution mode enum. That can be asynchronous or can be synchronous. So I will pass a synchronous value here. I have already explained what does that mean. Synchronous is interactive calling, and asynchronous is just like a batch calling or scheduled calling or recurring events, recurring method. So then we need to call dialog caption method, param method, and we need to also pass here caption of the dialog. So that need to be like resort group change. Okay, so then we need to start the actual operation by calling the start operation method here. So now resort group also need to be created a label against this. So I will just copy and go and create a label here, resort group change. Copy the label text here. So this is our label. Save it. Also we need an action menu item that will be also needed to call it as a synchronous. So we can go to our menu. These are display menu. We'll just right click here and add a new item. Go to the user interface, and then we need to choose action menu item here and just put a name here, and this should be a resort group change controller. Okay, so this will be our menu item name. So here is our menu, and we need to just select it and change the properties, and the properties need to be changed here. Also the label need to be assigned. So basically the object type need to be a class, and then the object need to be placed here. PKR resort group change controller, and then go to the label property, and here we need to just put resort group change basically. So resort group change. So we can make use of the same text, keep it smaller, and we'll make use of the same label. Just place here the label. Now we need to move to our basically interface in order to see where we can place it. Basically it need to be placed under the periodics or periodic tasks. Just explore our menu which we have already created. So there is a periodic task here. We need to just drag and drop this menu. Okay, so now it is placed under periodic task. We need to save it. So now once we have built the project, we can go to the resort management module, and then we can see periodic tasks that it now contains a menu item, resort group change. So once you click it, so that will basically show you the parameters, resort group and resort ID. So resort group is basically populating the values from the resort group table, and resort ID is populating the values from resort table. So this is how now it has been implemented. So what we need to do is we just need to check this, test this, whether it works perfectly or not. So for that purpose, go to the resort form or page, and then just make note of any of a resort ID and change its value. For example, this is a luxury and it should be if you see here, so basically this is a economy, so it need to be economy. Okay, so I need to just change it to the economy resort group, but through menu item. So just make note of this resort ID, and you can use Notepad for this purpose. So this is a resort ID, and what we need to change is to economy. Okay, so it is already luxury, but it need to be changed to economy. Just make note of current value to economy. So I will just go to the menu item, resort group change, periodic task, and then I need to just change economy, and resort ID need to be number 6. Okay, so now just press OK. There is no success message, actually that is also missing. So now we can check here that resort number 6 is changed now from luxury to economy. So it means our SysOperation framework is in synchronous mode, is perfectly running. So that's it for now, and we'll continue this session in our next video to complete the example, and that will cover more methods and more functionality under this same topic. Thank you very much, guys. Take care. Bye bye.